All right. I think I'm back. Aha. Here I am. I am back. Hey, everybody. I'm not sure if I'm back on Restream. Actually, on Rumble. If anyone is on Rumble, let me know if I'm still there or not. Because I can't tell at the moment. My system is not telling me. And it's just crazy. Crazy that just happened. I think I'm still on Rumble. Not sure. But that being said, I'm not sure what just happened. I'm going to try and give the system a chance to catch up. See, we're talking about freedom of speech. We're talking about the systems out there, whether it be in social media, whether it be on the news media, whether it be the government. They're trying to punish people. And they're trying to silence people. They're trying to make it difficult for people to share their views, their ideas, their thoughts, their conversations. And they're doing it to people. It doesn't matter. You could be as wealthy as Jordan Peterson, and he's getting punished too. We all are. So that's a problem. And because of that problem, we're all suffering. And it's a feedback loop. Canada is punishing people like Jordan Peterson. And the United Kingdom is arresting people, just regular citizens. They're arresting them for daring to have a conversation, for getting the information wrong sometimes. France is blocking people from coming into their country. Meanwhile, they're all going further and further left. Sweden is saying that they want to enforce the laws as they exist. And the left is saying, no, 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 you can't do that. You have to go further and further left. And that comes back to the United States. And we see more pressure on freedom of speech. Oh, see, Canada doesn't let people speak. We shouldn't do that here. In the United Kingdom, people get arrested for saying the wrong thing, for using the wrong pronoun, for giving out the wrong information. We should punish the right. We should punish people who are MAGA because that's what the United Kingdom is doing. We should be like Sweden. We should be more socialist like Sweden is, even though they're not. And we should try and invite more illegal aliens, and we should have open borders like them. This is the cycle, and it just keeps going further and further left. This is one of the reasons why we need to have debates, why we need to have multiple debates to talk about these things. We need to understand the policies of our elected officials so we can understand what the hell is going on right now, because it doesn't make sense. And we're going down a very, very dangerous path, a very dangerous path. I am pretty sure that right now, nothing, a lot of people are not seeing where we are at this moment. Trying to find out. Bear with me here, folks, as I'm trying to figure it out. But I wanted to finish that thought. What is going on? Yep, okay. So Rumble is still fine. I'm back on Rumble. Did Rumble wipe out the first video? Did they wipe out my first video? Oh, that'd be so upsetting. There should be 2 videos on Rumble. Don't know. Okay. I need to check my system. Don't know. Because it looks like I just lost a bunch of data on Rumble. It looks like I may have lost a bunch of data on YouTube. I wanted to come back and finish my thought, but at the same time, I want to check this out. So what I am going to do... Yeah, okay, YouTube started a brand new one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a quick break. Besides, it's 2-hour mark. For those who don't know, What we normally do on this channel is about once we go about 2 hours, I have a 13-year-old dog. He likes to go out for a walk. We usually take a break at about the 2 hour mark, and then we come back and we continue to have conversation. So I'm right there now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brief moment here. Bear with me. I'm going to try and fix my system, first of all. And I'm going to try and get everything up to date for you. I'm going to walk my dog. I'm going to do all of that. It's going to take about an hour. I apologize. I know I just got the system back up. I came right back on. I'm going to take about an hour. I'm going to try and fix things in the background. In the meantime, while I'm doing that, I want to, it's 4:30. So figure 5:30. 5:30. No, I'll be back in an hour. It's 5:30. Give me 1 second, folks. I'm just giving you an update here. I'm typing it out. Okay, so no, we'll be back at 5:30. We'll talk about Tim Walz. We'll talk about the stolen Valor. We'll move on to the domestic. Yes, I have a problem with, we have a feedback loop right now in Europe. And yes, people are losing their free speech. And yes, it is getting worse and worse. You can't think, like in Canada, just north of us, you can't have an opinion unless the government approves of it. You can't share information and talk about things unless the government approves it in the UK. You can't enforce the laws unless the left likes it, like in Sweden. We're seeing this around the world, and it's coming back to America, which means they're going to try and push us even further left. They're going to take away our right to free speech. We've already heard Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut. He has already suggested this, that he wants to have the government approve everything that's on social media. We're already hearing from Google, which is a monopoly, that has said that they're going to censor people, that they only want to approve the messages they like, the ones that they feel are authoritative. We've seen that with YouTube. We're seeing it all over the place. But that being said, let me come back in an hour, and I'll have that conversation with you guys. In the meantime,
Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Valor, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today as we talk about a very important issue, a court case that has just been decided and will have a massive impact on your life. Now, this isn't the news that you're being told about at this time. In fact,
good evening and welcome to the Matthew J. Show. So glad you could join us here. Another hot and steamy day here in Philadelphia. It's like our fourth or fifth, heat wave. But, we will get through it. And this is a great night to be watching the Matthew J. Show. We have a special guest, the one and only Michael Voss. Michael and I have shared many panels over the last couple of years. It's going to be an engaging and looming conversation. Any starting words, Michael, you want to get out there?
I'm going to try my best to keep up with you, and I look forward to any comments from the chat, of course. But we've got it's been a wild month, and I'm looking forward to talking about that and anything else you want to go through.
Great. And Michael, let's get started immediately. What's happening in New York City and New York. And I was just looking at something that the New York Supreme Court blocks New York City Mayor Adams' attempt to pause migrant arrivals. Now, I think this has primarily to do with the busing that was coming from Texas, where Governor Abbott was sending that. Do you think that Adams is just doing this to show people that he's attempting to slow the illegals coming into New York City, or was there more substance to this?
No, there's a little more substance to it. I mean, it's mostly posturing, but let's remember that he has gotten in trouble with the Biden-Harris administration, with many Democrats, in trying to reinforce and remind everyone that New York State can't deal with the illegal aliens that we have. New York City can't deal with the illegal aliens they have. It's 150,000 illegal aliens. 20,000 came from buses on Texas. So there's 130,000 that found their way to New York and entered. And because of the open border system, they're now in New York City, destroying the infrastructure, just like with Boston, with Chicago, with LA. We're seeing this across the country.
Michael, what are they being provided with as far as stipends? Are they getting free medical care or free housing, free trans passes, or what exactly are they getting?
Pretty much everything. They get housing. Now, they have already filled all of the hotels. They have filled most of the shelters. American citizens have been kicked out of hotels. They've been kicked out of shelters. This includes mothers and children have been kicked out. This was over the winter that they were kicked out to allow illegal aliens having a space. They've put up temporary tent cities and out in Floyd Bennett Field, which I've actually been to, actually served. That's a military base out there. I've actually served there. And they've also taken over schools for these illegal aliens to put them into that. So they've gotten that. They've gotten food. They have vouchers for food, cards that they get to carry, and they spend on food and other items, daily items that they need. They get a stipend on top of that. So, I mean, we are spending in New York City alone over $60,000 per illegal alien. That's about double the national average income of an American citizen. So they're living very well.
Well, let me ask you this as a follow-up, Michael, to that. And I think I was reading something the other day. As far as an impact on crime statistics in New York City, are illegals committing crime there in a big way, a small way, or what exactly is happening there?
It's a little difficult to understand that, because very often, and this is the trick that you will hear often in news media, they will say migrants. What does that mean? Because there's illegal aliens and there's legal migrants. They're not the same thing. But the news media, the Democrats, like to mix this together. So they'll say migrants, or they'll say immigration, but they don't separate legal from illegal. They combine them both and say, well, migration and immigrants, they're very law-abiding. Very true for legal migrants, not as true for illegal migrants. Illegal migrants have the higher proportion of crimes. If a migrant's going to commit a crime, it's more likely to be an illegal migrant or illegal alien. Let's call them what they are. Illegal alien, that's the actual legal term. Then it would be a legal migrant. And that's partially because of why they want to be here, partially because of how they're coming into the country. Many of the illegal aliens are coming in, besides breaking the law, but they're coming in with gangs or cartels, sex, what's the word they like to use these days? Human trafficking and sex trafficking. In other words, slavery. It's actually slavery. It's modern day slavery, but you say that, and that upsets the sensibilities of many in the left. And they only have, their image is, well, that only means the 1800s in America. It's stupid.
Michael, are we talking about petty crimes, or are we talking about felonies, or what exactly are we looking at as far as crime data?
We're talking about all of it. So if they're going to commit a crime, they're more likely to commit all crimes, including violent crime. We see a higher prevalence of violent crime, especially if they're associated with gangs or any of the cartels or any of human trafficking, any slavery. Then there's going to be a higher incidence of that, especially also with drugs. You're going to see that. And we see that very often. And the key is, it's not all of them, but you don't need that. There is recent studies have shown that somewhere between every one person, the recidivism rate, I hate that word, recidivism rate, which basically means repeat criminal activity.
Yes.
is you have a handful of people, about 10 to 20% of the criminals out there that have been caught will commit crimes again. And with the current bail reform, we have seen them repeat commit crimes 12 to 15 times each.
Michael, what role is the Manhattan DA doing here? Are they lenient when it comes to illegals committing crimes, or what's the story on that?
Alvin Bragg, it depends on their political stance, quite honestly, as best as I can understand it. You're talking about the Manhattan DA. His name is Alvin Bragg, a multimillionaire. Isn't that nice? Who has a very, very strong political allegiance. We saw that with the way he was handling not just Donald Trump, but look at how he handled the 2020 mass rioting, mass looting, the BLM riots that helped destroy New York City.
Yeah.
And when you look at what he did, he took 6,000 people who had been correctly and duly arrested for second-degree rioting, for looting, for destruction of property, mayhem in general. They broke laws in New York State, each and every one of them. And now he could have charged them with the minimum charge. He could have gave them basically parking tickets. I mean, he could have done something like that. Instead, he said these weren't crimes and waved them away. He just, poof, 6,000 people. You know, whether you did rioting in the second degree or looting, gone, just disappeared it.
Michael, is the governor, Kathy Hochul, and Adams and the Manhattan DA, are they on the same page when it comes to fighting illegal crimes, or
No.
are there little differences? Any
There's lots.
animosity between them?
There's lots of animosity and differences because they're all jockeying for power. They all want to be the big dog. They all want to get to the next elected office. They want more donations and more support from their political party. So they're all fighting against each other. And there's this constant internal battle to see who's on top, who's getting the most press and getting the most donations from their donor base. So they're constant. And none of them have the same belief in far left policies. I mean, when you look at it, look at the Democratic Party. You'll not hear Bernie Sanders isn't saying the same thing as AOC, but they're both socialists and they're both have the same socialist idea. Even AOC and Ilhan Omar and Cori Bush, Anna Presley, they're all in the squad. They have different voices. They have different objectives. So no, they're all squabbling. The only thing they have in common is orange man bad, MAGA is evil, and give them more money. That's about it.
No, I'm glad you clarified that, Mike. I was curious about this. Now, I know this was a few months ago, or it might be ongoing, but I want your thoughts, Michael, on, do you think positioning the National Guard in the New York subway system or anywhere else will actually deter crime or have an effect whatsoever?
It hasn't. I don't even have to guess on that. It is a fact. We had 750 members of the National Guard were activated by Governor Hochul, which instantly tells you there is a crime problem. Full stop. You cannot say crime is not an issue or that people are safe if you have to activate 750 members of the National Guard. That's an oxymoron. It's absolutely opposites repelling each other. You can't say that. So we put them into the subway, and we have continued to see people getting shot, getting stabbed, getting mugged, getting thrown onto the tracks. That equals failure. Absolute, no questions asked, failure. So no, it was useless. It was meant to make tourists feel safe so that they will continue to come to the city and spend money. But the citizens never believed it in the first place, and they've continued to conduct their lives like they normally would, wearing body armor or being armed themselves to better protect themselves. Okay. Because no, Kathy Hochul she didn't do this to make people safe.
Michael, usually I come to New York City maybe once a month or once every other month. Mm-hmm. What would I anticipate getting off in Midtown or getting off at the new Amtrak station? I know it's been there for a year or two. What would I see illegals out in front of some hotels as I go through Midtown or not?
Of course you would. You'll see illegal aliens everywhere in New York City, but you wouldn't necessarily notice There's nothing. You let me try and phrase this. There are illegal aliens from everywhere in the world. Everyone in the world is coming to America. That's a fact.
Right.
We have more people trying to get into America from every country in the world than there are Americans trying to go anywhere else in the world. That is a fact by multiples of magnitude. So you're going to have illegal aliens from not just Angola, not just Chile, not just Lithuania, but everywhere else you can think of. So you're not necessarily going to notice who's the illegal alien that might be there. They could be from Britain, and you wouldn't necessarily know.
No, I guess I should have been more specific. I envision these things like what's happening back in my home country of Ireland, where the illegals are actually out in front of in tents, going block long in front of some of the tourist hotels. You don't still have that. Like if I came out of say that, for example, the front of where Madison Square Garden is and some of those hotels or that hotel across the street, you wouldn't necessarily see them sleeping in tents out in front of the hotels.
No, that's where the tourists are. And unlike in California, where Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, goes around every so often whenever there's an event that's going on, then they sweep on through and push out all the illegal aliens so it looks like they've actually done something to help people. No. In New York City, we just don't let them in the first place. We have a homeless problem, and you go into the subway, you will definitely see it no matter where you are in downtown or anywhere else. But you won't see it in Madison Square Garden. They keep that pretty clean. They keep that pretty open. But yes, you will see tents under various if you're looking under various bridges, if you go into some of the back alleys or the side streets that aren't the big tourist spots, yeah, you'll see homeless people all over the place.
A real quick question, Mike. Mayor Adams, wasn't he former NYPD?
Yes.
Okay, what is his current rapport with NYPD? Is it tight? Is it distant? What is it?
Mixed. I don't think he was the most loved of the police officers when he was in. He was more administrative than he was operational. And so there's a difference. It's kind of like in the military. You have one wing that is more paperwork oriented, more logistics oriented. And then you have another wing that's more on the street, actually dealing with the crime and the criminals directly. So you have those two different divisions of that. And Mayor Adams has always been more so towards the paperwork side than the actual on the street dealing with crime side. He has a lot of problems, and there's a reason why his campaign, his people were being investigated by the FBI. Of course, you could say that about most New York politicians, most Chicago politicians. There's a lot of corruption because it is so one party total control that breeds lots of corruption. But most of the people in New York City, many of the common people who don't pay attention to politics a lot, but they're paying attention to what the results are, they have always felt that Mayor Adams has been ineffective, but too protective of police. The police have always felt that he's never supported them enough when it comes to a critical issue.
Michael, how about handling the pro-Palestinian protest a few months ago in New York City campuses? What kind of grade would you have given the police? Was there any friction at that time, or did the police successfully execute removing these students?
Have you seen the news?
Well, we're gonna see it in about 2 or 3 weeks. Campus returns. You're gonna see the same bullshit.
Well, it's the same thing all the time. So no, they did a horrible job. Relative to what you call a good job and a bad job. Were there kids being set on fire? The buildings get set on fire. Windows were broken, doors were broken. Students tried to take over buildings. Yes, that all happened. So if you're counting that, that's a failure. But was anyone killed? No. Were women sexually assaulted? Yes. So it's how do you count it? Most people would say, since the media stopped talking about it, it was a success. I don't. The media stopped talking about it because it made Democrats look bad, and so they couldn't fortify the 2024 election.
Michael, were there outside actors that were actually magnifying
Absolutely.
what was going on, not just the
Absolutely.
students?
Absolutely. We know for a fact that multiple news media outlets on the left are determined that 30% of the individuals at each of the campuses were outside actors. They were not students, they weren't teachers, they weren't faculty. They had no purpose, no reason to be on those campuses other than they were there to be an activist, to try and incite riots and fighting, and to get head.
Michael, real quick, I think you're over modulating. It's
Am I?
coming in. Yeah. Yeah, it was coming in kind of it was difficult to hear you the last 5-10 seconds.
Okay, is that better? It might also be where the microphone is. Might be.
Okay. That's
better?
fine. I can yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, I thought it was very important for us to start off the show about New York City. I mean, it's a place I love visiting New York City. I know I've been going up for decades. I don't know if you know, I'm retired transit official. I love railroads. I love trains. I think you and I discussed it before. And I love visiting, coming up there. I like to go to Grand Central Terminal. I know a lot of people think that's probably crazy, but I do like trains and whatnot. And New York City has plenty of it, with the subways and whatnot. What has saddened me, and certainly saddened you, is to see how the city is things like, it's just like here in Philadelphia and most Democrat-run cities, where crime is becoming so elevated. And I know you were speaking about crime on the subway. These things are called thrill kills, where the homeless people are pushing people on the platform in front of oncoming trains. Well, that's been happening in Philadelphia. We've had a couple murders on city buses since I left, and I've only been gone for about a year. But I like visiting the place, and I'm certainly want to get up there in the next week or two. But New York City, it's such a great place, and you want people to visit it from all around the world, all around the country. You want them to feel reasonably safe. But from what you've been describing for the past 20 minutes, is that maybe it's not a safe place, and the fact that illegals are everywhere. They may not necessarily bother you, but they're certainly probably overwhelming, whether it be law enforcement or medical care and housing and whatnot. It's a saturation of illegals, and it's not just New York City. They were sleeping in Logan Airport, Michael. I'm sure you're well aware of that. They have no places to put them anymore.
Well, yes, and in respect to New York City, in particular, we've always had large numbers of illegal aliens. Never this much, but we've always had large numbers relative to other parts of the country. We have some idea how to deal with that. And also, it is one of the most integrated cities in the entire world. Forget just in the United States, and the world. Right. So we have a way of adapting to that. So I wouldn't say it's more dangerous in the 70s, more dangerous than in the 2000s. For people who've been in New York City, that gives you a realm. So it's relatively dangerous, but not crazy. But compared to other parts of the country, sure. I mean, I remember when I lived in upstate New York, and what people would tell me were absolutely dangerous neighborhoods, like where I bought my house, was absolutely peaceful. I mean, they've never seen the Bronx. They've never seen the 1980s when we had to go through the crack crisis. So, it's all relative. But yes, we have too many illegal aliens in the United States. They are causing infrastructure problems everywhere in every single state that we are shipping them into because we can't handle it. We're literally, upstate New York is suing New York City and New York State to prevent them from shipping out illegal aliens by the truckloads because they can't handle them. They already have enough problems because we have a horrible economy. Did you just see the economic numbers? 4.3% unemployment, and it is increasing. We have on average at least 25% inflation, if not 45% real world. We have higher interest rates that are going on. The dollar is being devalued, and we have higher international tensions. Plus, 225 known or suspected terrorists have tried to enter the United States through our borders. That's just in the last year and a half. Not 4 years, not decade, year and a half. So we have a lot of pressures going on all at once, which magnifies each and every one of those items they all become bigger because they're all happening at the same time. And we have a government right now, a leadership. We're talking about the Democrats, we're talking about Biden Harris, whose main goal is get through the next election. They want to win the next election. They're obsessed with power and getting to the next election rather than fix the problem, have a solution.
Is there any evidence, Michael, that the illegals in New York City, and of course around the country, that they are registering to vote at DMVs or welfare offices? Is there any evidence to that, or is that, I heard that in Minnesota that the VP for Harris in 2023, illegals were getting driver's licenses and they were registering to vote. Is that the same thing happening in New York City or New York State?
That's happening. Well, to an extent, the answer is yes, and to an extent, the answer is no. Here's the problem. Nobody's looking. No one has a way to find out. Now, if we're just going by the law of large numbers, absolutely. What do we know for sure? We do know that New York, California, Minnesota, several states have made it a law, made it possible for illegal aliens to get driver's licenses, even though that is illegal. That is a crime. But they're bypassing that because they're sanctuary states, and they say, yes, we're going to give them the ability to drive a car. How are they paying the insurance? I don't know, because that's also a crime. They can't do that. But fine, they're doing that, and they're letting them get jobs, which is yet another crime. Fine. So multiple crimes are happening here. But when you go through the process in California, New York, many states, you automatically are registered to vote. Now, it's very easy, very simple. I know they say, but it's impossible for someone who's an illegal alien to get registered to vote. No, it's not. It's a button. It's a push of a button. It is very simple. We're talking about massive administrations, and we see they screw up everything all the time, consistently. That's why we keep getting more and more government to make up for the errors of other parts of the government. It's insane.
Well, Michael, you said we don't know, but Freedom of Information Acts, things like that, we can't get access to any city or state data which would tell us or give us a better understanding of if it's happening.
No, it's not that we don't have access. There is no data. It's like when I did a study on red flag laws, I went back to Connecticut. They've had red flag laws since 1999. I asked them a very simple question. I asked the state a very simple question. Are children being separated from their parents because of the red flag laws when they have a red flag incident? Which I know factually the answer is yes. What I don't know is how many. Their answer was, yes, it's happening. We can't tell you how many. We don't count. That's the problem. There is no data to grab. We don't know how many illegal aliens are getting registered to vote because no one knows and no one's counting.
Michael, that in itself is kind of a political act. We don't have any data on it when you think about it. That's by design, is what you're saying, right? Or no?
I would think so, because this is something that we can have some count on or some general understanding. They don't want that. So now you would actually literally have to know that, I don't know, Ben Angola, you had to know that Ben Angola went and got a driver's license and that he actively got the right to vote or got access to it. And if you didn't know that with the exact ID number for him, you would never be able to track it.
Okay. Listen,
it's devious. It's really devious.
Oh, it is. I'm glad you clarified some of that stuff, Michael. I wasn't familiar with that. Listen, we have a lot to go over with, but I want to stay while we're in New York City. I have to get your thoughts and your spin on this. The elephant in the room to the Matthew J. Show is September 18th in New York City. And that's a big date if you're in MAGA and whatnot. How do you think how will that go? Will they defer it again to a later date, or will they actually sentence President Trump? And is it possible, Michael, that they could remand him to Rikers Island immediately, or would there be a different process altogether?
Okay. Almost didn't know what you meant, but yes, it's September 18th is when we're supposed to see Donald Trump get sentenced. He's already lost, so it's a matter of sentencing, although he has an appeal going in. We'll see how that goes. One, they can't put him in Rikers. Can't. He has Secret Service protections. It would not be possible to have Secret Service with him in Rikers. He would absolutely have to go to either an abandoned prison or into a home, restricted home.
Trump Tower? Trump Tower?
Basically, Trump Tower. He would be restricted in place. He couldn't leave Trump Tower. I know there's a word for it. I forgot it right this second. So those would be the only two choices because of the Secret Service, because of the national secrets that he's had access to. He would have to be protected in that way. Do I expect that if they could, they would charge him? Yes, I've said it publicly before. They would probably give him 2 years, at minimum 2 years, just to silence him and to try and emphasize he's a felon, he's a bad guy, he's in jail, don't vote for him. I don't think that would actually stop anyone from voting for him, but that's what they would try and do. I think that's all going to fail. We know he has limited immunity according to this the Supreme Court. We know that most people have looked at this entire case against him, where there was one action that he was charged for 34 times over and over for the same one act, and they magnified it to felony levels. This is completely corrupt. Everyone knows it, and everyone expects it to be thrown out. It's just, this is what they do when they don't have an actual candidate that can beat him until they can get past the election. This is just window dressing.
Well, let me put this scenario at you, Michael. Is it possible they say, okay, you're guilty, we're going to give you a year or 2 years, but you don't have to start serving until November 6th? Do you think that they won't incarcerate him immediately, or will they just say, okay, we won't interfere with the election, like they haven't already done that? We're going to wait till November 6th. And I think the damage is done because obviously the Democrats and their media accomplices will run with this. They're already running with this convicted felon, sex rapist and all this other crap.
Nothing they are doing is trying to help Donald Trump, and nor has it have any kind of positive benefit towards the election. They could care less. All they want is, they wanted the headline, they wanted the mug shot, but that worked against them. They wanted the headline, Trump guilty, because they felt that would justify all of their fears and their fear mongering. Didn't work. And they're going to want to put him in jail the earliest second that they could. But because we're talking about Secret Service, we're talking about what kind of facility would have to be, what kind of logistics that go along with that. Even if they wanted to, they couldn't put him in jail the same day or in November. We're looking at the soonest that he would go into a jail or a lockdown would probably be December of 2024, maybe January of 2025. And even then, if depending on the election, you would see that deferred. And this case is going to get overturned long before the next 4 years. It's going to go straight to the Supreme Court, especially if he wins. And I think he will. And it'll go straight to the Supreme Court, and they'll immediately rule on it and throw it out.
Well, Michael, I didn't convey this too. Is this possible that Trump loses and then he goes right to jail November 6th?
No.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, what if he loses?
Doesn't matter if he
November?
wins or loses. Doesn't matter if he wins or loses. We wind up with the same.
Still has to go through the appeal process.
Well, it's not the appeal process. It's the logistics of Secret Service.
Okay,
that's the key. He has to have Secret Service with him. You can't do that in a regular prison. So he has to be in an abandoned prison or in his house arrest. That's what I was thinking of. It has to be one or the other, and they have to work out the logistics of that. No matter what else is going on, it can only be that.
I just think, Michael, they love optics. The media, the Democrats, they love optics. But I know what you're saying, and of course, that sounds logical from a Secret Service perspective. Now, if we could just slide over to my state and Butler, Pennsylvania, given what transpired a couple of weeks ago, I know we can go through the whole investigation. I just, watched another video of the kid scampering around the roof minutes before he took the shot, and Trump's still on stage. Me personally, I think this was a deep state operation. It was allowed to happen. I'm not saying the kid was part of the conspiracy. He was probably just a bit player. So what I'm trying to get at this, Michael, to connect what we just talked about in the last 5 minutes, is if the deep state is willing to let it ride like that, where President Trump was a sitting duck, I think it wouldn't be too far of a stretch that something happened September 18th, as far as incarceration is concerned. If they don't care about that, if they're looking at putting them in jail for 900 years, I think anything is on the table with these nuts.
I understand why some they definitely present themselves in that manner, but there is organization to the chaos out there, and there is a leadership that knows that they want people to be afraid, but they don't want them to feel like their back is against the wall. In most cases, now mind you, what we saw in Butler assassination of Donald Trump is a net result of this fear mongering that we've been seeing consistently for over 7-8 years now by the left. You're be afraid, be terrified, Orange Man bad, Hitler, the world is going to end, and there is no choice. Oh, by the way, we have a zombie for president, part-time president. That's Joe Biden. Kamal Harris has failed at everything she's ever done. Oh my God, what are you going to do? And they created the environment that allowed that kid to be warped in his view of the world and to take extremist action that no one supports. And then when they got caught, said, "Oh my goodness, how could this have possibly happened? Who could have put all those dominoes in place and wait for him to trip into them?" Which is really disingenuous. Understanding that there is there are some people who are thinking about these things, who are setting these dominoes down, who are creating the minefield that the rest of the world is walking through on a regular basis because they want power. They also have a very clear understanding that there's only certain things they can do. Otherwise, it tips things away from them and creates a problem. There's a reason why we stopped talking about the assassination attempt and the investigation. And instantly we were talking about who's going to be, it's going to be Kamala Harris as VP and who's her, running for presidency and who is going to be her VP. The media instantly, within 4 days, shifted the entire world's attention from an assassination attempt against one of our leaders to, this backup candidate and their ascension, their coronation without a single vote. No one voted for it. And they put her in place and then said, and after they put her in place, then they said, oh, by the way, she's going to pick a vice president just to keep the momentum going. It is absolutely evil when you think about it. But that because they knew that assassination attempt was too far.
Yeah. Michael, did you notice how they went from calling, fascist, Hitler, everything under the sun about President Trump to just calling him weird or calling us weird, JD Vance or whatever? Do you notice they tried to tone down the language because they feel maybe deep down they might feel partially responsible for setting up the environment for something like this to happen?
No, they didn't tone it down. Have you been listening to what's going on YouTube and Twitter? No, they didn't tone it down. They stopped saying it for 48 hours. Big deal. And then they went right back into it. Listen to MSNBC, CNN. They're still saying the same things they were saying before, plus minus a couple of key words, but otherwise it's the same sentiment, same idea. Same Orange Man, still bad. MAGA, still evil. You're still Nazis if you don't obey the left. That's just the way they have it. But they want to posture like they are so far above the things that they have done themselves. Right. And it's insulting to the average person because we all see it. And quite honestly, it's their own making. They've been doing this for 7 years. What is it? Tim Walz, who's the Democratic nominee for the vice presidency under Kamala Harris. He recently said something about, he was talking about Republicans are always talking about the race card. No, we're not. Historically and consistently, that's a Democrat issue. That's not a Republican issue. Right. We don't talk about race. And yes, I am a Republican. I am a conservative Republican. We don't talk about race. We don't care. We talk about meritocracy. It's the Democrats that are constantly talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's their idea. What is it? Affirmative action. That's their idea. That's not from the right. That's not ours. We talk about, did you earn it? They talk about how many check boxes did you clear? So when he says it's disingenuous, and basically what they're doing is, you're an evil person because you're not doing what I would do in your position, and they blame us for what they do.
Michael, do you think it was a bad idea for Trump last week to go to the Black Association of Journalists in Chicago? Because what they're essentially trying to do, they're trying to turn this into race and make that a campaign issue. Was that a prudent move by the Trump campaign to send them to these events? Or was he right in pointing out, one day Kamala is Jamaican, one day she's Indian, one day she's Black? Was he right? Was he right to kit that out there to everyone?
Okay. So before you get in trouble, let me clarify something that I've said multiple times. I have several videos on this. To be very clear, Kamala is Black. There is no question. Black is skin tone. Black is genetic history. It means she's African in descent, essentially. So she is Black.
Okay.
She's not African American. And in America, we misunderstand and misconstrue that Black equals African American. That's not true. The African American is societal and cultural. Being Black is genetic. Two different things. So Kamala is Black. She's descended from Africans. Absolutely. She's not African American. She's East Indian. She's Jamaican, which would be West Indies. And she's said that herself. Just look at her campaign in 2016 when she won the Senate seat. She was talking about being East Indian, not Black. So it's whatever's convenient. She's very much like Hillary Clinton.
That's what I was getting to.
Yeah.
But I know I know what you said. What you initially started with, if I gather this correctly, Trump shouldn't go in that area. She's Black.
I was glad that Trump went to the National Association of Black Journalists. It was a trap. Absolutely. It was a hostile event. Absolutely. He knew that. And you know what? He had the balls to go there and do it anyway, to go and speak to groups that aren't necessarily in his normal arena. And that's good, because of what a president should do. Reach out to people. Doesn't mean you're going to succeed. Doesn't mean you're going to win them over necessarily. But at least you're willing to hear their voices. At least you're willing to share your voice with them. Same thing with Bitcoin. Same thing with the Libertarian Party. He did it multiple times. Does everyone agree or accept his view? Maybe not. But guess what? I don't see the Democrats coming to any of the Republican events or to the Libertarian events.
That's true.
They're not even trying.
Michael, Kamala was supposed to be at that event in Chicago, right?
Oh, yeah. She was supposed to be at the National Association of Black Journalists. I'm going to call that the NABJ because that's just too long to say.
Michael, how would you characterize President Trump's current relationship with the Black community? Does he have a strong rapport or a moderate or weak rapport? What does he have?
Moderate, about the same he's always had. Democrats don't have some kind of great love. Black people don't run around going, I love Democrats. No, they don't.
Yeah, that's true.
They don't care. It's rote memorization. My mom was a Democrat, so I'm a Democrat, and I don't pay attention to politics, so I just vote Democrat. I don't know who any of these people are. I vote straight down the line Democrat. There are Republicans in this country that do the exact same thing. Family's Republican, I just vote Republican. Don't know any of these names. I just vote straight down the line. There are literally machines around this nation where you can just hit a button and it'll automatically vote for you straight down the line, whatever your party is. So there's nothing you can do about that. But it's for the people who do pay attention. They look at Donald Trump as the candidate based on his issues, what he has actually done. Same thing with all the Democrats. And we work it from there. So it's not like he's like the Democrats have some extra special space that they obtain. Yeah, I see.
Michael, New York would never be in play for President Trump. Would it?
Sure it is.
There's a potential he could win in New York.
Well, it's not realistic potential. It's not a number that you can count on. Absolutely not.
Well, you went to his visit, right? In New York City?
Yeah, I was here.
How was it? How was it?
When he came to the Bronx, we got about
Yes.
10,000 people reliably inside the park, about 10,000 people that were there to watch him. There were 4 drones in the air, 2 helicopters in the air 3.5 hours before he actually got onto the stage. He was very well loved, a lot of positivity amongst all the people that were there. And as people could see from my still photos, people of every nationality and type that you could possibly want that's in New York was at that event. The problem is people are voting Democrat not because they love Democrats. It's because they want the free stuff. They want the government aid. They need that system, that chain of power, because it keeps them going, because we've made people dependent on the government. So if you change that government, if you shrink that government, these people no longer have a safety net. They no longer are getting their free stuff. They now have to put effort in, and they have to put effort into things they've never had to do before. People don't like that. It breaks their routine. It makes it life harder for them. They're challenged more. They have to be more meritocracies and earn what they're going to be receiving. People don't like that. So that's why the Democrats they have enslaved, literally, economically, they have enslaved many people, not just black people, but many people who are poor, and put them into that system that really has no way out.
Right. Michael, how many counties in New York State would you consider Trump country, or is there any counties in New York that would vote for Trump?
Upstate New York, most of it.
Most of it.
There are 62 counties in New York State. Most people don't realize that. Everyone thinks of New York City, and that's about it. Maybe they think of Albany as well. There are 62 counties in New York. Once you step outside of New York City, almost all of the rest of New York is Republican. Almost all of New York State is red.
Would you advise the Trump, Michael, would you advise the Trump campaign to spend some more time in New York?
No, it's not worth it. It's not
Pennsylvania, obviously, but not New York.
No, it's not cost effective. If Trump wins, it's just because people have gotten that fed up. You can't, the more money you spend here is money that you could have spent somewhere else where it would be more effective, because there's no guarantee. The biggest problem New York has, there are as many Republicans as voting Republicans as voting Democrats that actually show up and make the vote. It's just that most Republicans don't.
What do the voter registrations look like statewide?
You're looking about 2 to 1, but here's the thing. You'll get 3 to 5 million votes in New York City that'll be Democrat, largely Democrat. There's 5 million registered gun owners who are Republicans in New York State. There's 20 million people in the state. We could match that. They don't show up. It's just the fact. Upstate doesn't show up in the numbers that just in New York City will show up, partially because of density, but they just don't show up.
Or is the state GOP kind of weak as far as going out there and going door to door and getting people registered?
They're miserable. The state GOP has already given up because they don't plan to win. They're very happy being in second place.
Wow. You know, Michael, I was at the Trump Wildwood, New Jersey rally, and I'll tell you, it was a sight to behold. I mean, it was certainly over 100,000 people there, and that is in New Jersey. Now, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked you about New York. Would New Jersey be more winnable than New York, or are they both kind of out of bounds?
Absolutely the same thing. Absolutely the same case. We have miserable administrations that are in charge, which are, we have single party rules. Democrats have control there. They are destroying their own cities, but you're not going to win. One of the biggest problems, everyone who is conservative, Republican, libertarian, they're leaving, and they have been leaving for over a decade. The number one, usually it's number 1 or number 2, that New York is the number 1 or number 2 space of exodus, that people are getting up, American citizens are getting up and going anywhere else but staying in New York State. And New Jersey is roughly within the top 10. This is for the last decade. So it tells you something. You're getting a higher and higher concentration of Democrats who vote Democrat, who are in the system, in the loop, dependent on those Democrats to give them free stuff and to give them aid to help them live their lives in this increasingly, this vortex that gets deeper and deeper of debt and failure.
Right.
Yes, at some point they are going to be fed up, and yes, people are noticing the failure in this intrinsic system, this loop that they're almost like a loop that they're in. And at some point that will change, but why invest the money in it now when I have no guarantee this is the moment it changes?
Michael, are you near AOC's district?
Very near it, yeah.
Okay, I look at some of the YouTube stuff and some of the events that she holds, town gatherings or whatever. It looks like a lot of it's hostile. Is she how does she win the election then?
Because she's a Democrat. It was I think it was 2019 when Nancy Pelosi, who was still Speaker of the House at the time, was at a convention and said that, literally, these are her words. You can look this up. There was a glass of water on a table. She pointed and go, if there was a D after it, if there was a D attached to that glass of water, it would win in AOC's district. Absolute fact. She got lucky that she was cute and caught people's attention when, literally, this is how AOC won her seat. She was cute, caught people's attention, and the Democrat incumbent didn't do anything to try and stop her because he thought it was a joke. Because there's an 88% probability of every incumbent member of Congress will get reelected. 88%. They're more likely to die in office than they are to be voted out. So he didn't care. He didn't try. And he didn't expect that this cute girl was going to get enough attention online to get the momentum in a off year. It was a election year that wasn't presidential. It wasn't a presidential race. So lower numbers, lower turnout. He didn't think she'd actually be able to get people to show up. She did.
Why is the public so enamored with AOC's image? Like, can
She's
you
young.
see 5 or 10 years from now, Michael, her running for president? Is that possible?
Yes, absolutely possible. She'll lose. That's like Jill Stein. She runs every year, but she loses. You've got Howie Hawkins, runs almost every year. He loses. You have certain people that constantly run. Doesn't mean they're going to win, but we know they run every time. Will we see AOC run? Yes. And when she does it in 2028, when she will be legally of age, she won't be running as a Democratic Socialist because the Democratic Socialists are losing. We've already seen Jamal Bowman get kicked out. Cori Bush is about to lose in her race. People are not happy with progressives, just like they're not happy with socialists or communists. So until they reinvent themselves and come up with a new name for what they are, you're going to see AOC. She's backing off and just becoming a general Democrat. She's more of a moderate Democrat. No, she's still a progressive.
Where would you put Hakeem Jeffries on this scale, Michael? Where would you put Hakeem Jeffries?
He's a progressive. He used to be a member of the Progressive Caucus. In fact, he used to lead the Progressive Caucus until he became head of the House Democrats. So, he is a progressive.
He's a big time blowhard. I mean, I get a lot of play out of responding to him. Mm-hmm. A lot of people like when I go on there. But I was just wondering, I go after him because it's unbelievable, like the amount of hate towards MAGA. It's in every single tweet. How can you the demonization? I know you talked about it a few minutes ago. It's what's happening, culminates in what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. You do have to take it down a notch every once in a while, but they have no intention on doing that, right?
Seems not, because it's the ultimate bad guy. It's, again, there's a demon. I'm a demon hunter. Don't you want to support me, or do you want the demon to kill you? Look at, if you boil down the language to what is it saying and making it as simple as possible, that's how they have portrayed it. They're fighting against you call it a demon, you call it a dragon, whatever you want to call it. They're portraying themselves as the good guys fighting on behalf of you. Now, mind you, these good guys fighting on behalf of you are filled with corruption. Look at Robert Menendez out of New Jersey, who just got convicted of, he got caught the second time, not the first time, the second time, caught with gold bricks. Come on. It's crazy. They're not good, intrinsically good people.
Right.
nor are they trying to do anything intrinsically good for you. They just want you to think, to feel
Right.
like you're, and that's their big thing nowadays. Feel. They want you to feel. And if you
Michael,
feel
Michael,
good, it's good enough.
I'm hoping I'm going to ask you a question. I hope you know a lot more about this than I do. Jamie Raskin says he's not going to acknowledge the Trump win, and they're going to fight it tooth and nail. You know anything about that? Or how would they keep, if Trump won, how would they keep him out of the White House?
Same way that they tried to do it in 2000 with Al Gore, same thing that they tried with Hillary Clinton. They've tried this several times. It's not new. It's the same thing that they were screaming about in 2016 and 2020. Oh my God, you can't do that, because that's what Democrats do, because that's what Democrats have done repeatedly. It's the normal process that the Constitution allows for, to have challenges, to contest the verification
Well, I
of the
agree with
votes.
you. They criminalized it. They criminalized it for our part.
Why do 70% of critical thinkers ditch Disney Plus? Because they found something better. In today's economy, every dollar counts. So what's worth subscribing to? Let's compare Disney Plus and No Soundbites Allowed. With Disney Plus, you're shelling out $140 a year for virtue signaling shows targeting mythical modern audiences. Plus, a theater visit could cost you $40 or more. Ouch. Now imagine a platform where fresh perspectives, insightful interviews, and engaging discussions are at your fingertips. That's No Soundbites Allowed. And the best part? It's free, with an option to support only if you choose. While Disney Plus ticks off virtue signal checkboxes, No Soundbites Allowed offers real talk and sharp analysis. Perfect for those who crave depth and clarity. Why break the bank for entertainment? Subscribe to No Soundbites Allowed and enjoy meaningful content without the hefty price tag. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Valor. I'm the political dragon here in our offices in the Bronx, New York. It is August 11th. I am happy to be here with each and every one of you. We've had quite a show today, talking about what's been happening internationally, talking about some of the breaking news that came out about three. We're now going to have potentially three presidential debates between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, although the Harris team seemed to be rather iffy about two of the events. Don't know why. Obviously, she's the best candidate. Wouldn't she want to talk to the American people about what she believes, what she stands for? Well, maybe not, because as we have seen, she's not willing to go onto her own website and tell anyone what she believes. She'll ask you for money. She'll tell you to vote for her. She'll ask you to volunteer, but she won't tell you what she's going to do if she gets the power she is asking you for. And that's kind of telling in and of itself. Okay. We talked a little bit about what's happening in the Middle East and the fact that one of the three potential debates that are coming up in September, one of them must be about the Middle East, must be about international policy. We have proxy wars we are fighting. We have hostages we need to get back home. We have influence and allies that we need to support. We have enemies around the world that we need to suppress. We need to have a conversation. We need to understand, what is it that Kamala Harris plans to do? What is it that Donald Trump plans to do? We have a pretty good idea with Donald Trump. We've seen what he has done in the past. What would Kamala Harris do? She didn't show up for meetings in the southern border. She embarrassed America with South Korea twice. She hasn't been very successful, but what's her plan? We don't know, and we really, really need to know that. So I am looking forward to that. And we had a little bit of a problem. It seems that it's not just Google with their monopoly, and they have been, courts have decided that Google is a monopoly, and I'll talk about that in just 1 second. But also Microsoft is a very well-known monopoly. And right now they're trying to convince you and me that we need to have Windows 11. I don't want Windows 11, at least not yet. And I have resisted that. And because I resisted that, it seems suddenly I'm starting to have problems with my computer programs. On Friday, I wasn't able to type anything. Today, we saw that the system crashed and we weren't able to, our live stream was interrupted in the middle. If any of it was, we are recording this, so if anything it has been deleted by YouTube or Rumble or any of the services, we will re-upload the first half to make sure that is available for people if it's down on any system. So that's kind of where we were, and we were talking mostly about the impact of free speech around the world, that we are in this loop where the United States is moving to the left, and we go through we have our students, our teachers, our individuals going from our colleges, especially the highest level of colleges, that are going around the world that are bringing CRT, intersectionality, all of the issues of America and our political left, and introducing it to countries like the United Kingdom, like Canada, like France. We're exporting our political propaganda of the left to the other nations, and they're adopting it. They're going even further to the left in their nations because they have less freedoms than we have here, less guarantees than we do here. And so they're pushing further left, which inspires the American left to try and catch up, because you can never be leftist enough. You can never be enough of a progressive. You always have to continuously move to the left, which then keeps the cycle going. But one part I didn't get to mention about that before we get to Tim Walz, before we start talking about the 2024 election, I did want to bring up something that's important about this. Not only are we seeing the left continuously moving left, not only can you not be leftist enough, not only is free speech being destroyed around the world in the United States and other countries, not only are we seeing things like in
whatever that is,
we're seeing people like Jordan Peterson being shut down by the Canadian government, the Canadian Supreme Court saying he has to start going to a re-education. He has to be re-educated, which it should terrify people, that a first world nation, Canada, is re-educating its population. But we also have the United Kingdom is running around, and now they're saying, their police commissioner is saying that they're going to come after Americans and anyone else in the world for daring to have free speech. I quote the article from the New York Post. One key aspect that makes this apparent crackdown on social media particularly shocking to critics is that the British government is threatening to extradite American citizens. Extradite. They're going to take you from America to bring you to the United Kingdom to be jailed in the United Kingdom for violating their national rules about free speech. So you're free to speak in the United States. We can say anything we want. I know a lot of people say, well, you can't talk about misinformation. Yes, you can say that. You can't say disinformation. Yes, you can. Oh, you can't talk about hate speech. Yes, you can. That is what the First Amendment allows. Because just because you don't like it, just because you don't agree with it, doesn't mean I can't say it. And because you can do that in America as an American citizen, the United Kingdom, which has adopted the furthest left policies of America under Keir Starmer, the Labor Department, are saying, hey, you know what? The great answer is, let's go and punish Americans for daring to speak about the United Kingdom. And this is something that the people there can't do. You can't say that a cop looks like your lesbian aunt. You have a lesbian aunt. You have nothing against gay people. You say, that cop looks like my lesbian aunt. Kind of like saying, hey, when people tell me, I look like Denzel Washington. I don't find that offensive. I don't get upset. I don't start screaming racism because someone said, Mike, you look kind of like Denzel Washington. I do. And some people will say, Mike, you kind of look like Malcolm X. And you know what? I did. When I was younger, I looked a lot more like him. True. I don't get upset. I don't freak out. I don't go, oh my God, it's racism, and try and sue people and throw them in jail. No, but the United Kingdom, because they do not believe in free speech, because they are trying to shut people's voices down, because they are blaming everyone and anyone for saying things that are not approved, Keir Starmer is perfectly fine with trying to arrest Americans in America for having free speech and using it to describe what's happening in the United Kingdom. That is insane. We need a debate about international policy, because otherwise we have countries that think that they can arrest Americans for living life in America, for living under the Constitution, under the First Amendment. They think that they can come after us and punish us, and that's unacceptable. And I needed to bring that up because I didn't get a chance to bring that up before. And again, this is an article. You can see this at the end of the show. You'll be able to see the links to talk about it yourself. I think that is absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. It is ridiculous. We cannot accept that. Cannot accept that. That is too much. Now, and I want more people to hear about that. Now, I also want to bring up, because while we were on the break, and I'm looking for it now. So during the break, we did get a comment from one of the newer viewers, Brock Arthur. Brock, and thank you again, Ashley, for joining and watching the show as long as you may have or may not, and your question about the Trump family and military service. I also want to thank Brock for being part of the channel and bringing up your comments. And Brock, I remind you of Lester Holt. Hey, you know what? Lester Holt is famous, wealthy, and respected. I have no problem with being told that I look like Lester Holt. I have no problem with that. It's not a big deal. But in the United Kingdom, you'd get arrested for saying that. And that's something we cannot accept, especially if we have leaders who will not stand up for the American people, which I don't think Kamal Harris would. I think Kamal Harris would let American citizens be arrested by Keir Starmer and the Labour Party of the United Kingdom for saying something they don't like. And that is insane. And that's why we have to break this cycle. That's why we have to be aware that there is a global restriction on freedom of speech that is going on right now. It's very important. So we had Brock during the break. He mentioned, and I'm bringing this up so everyone can see it again. He said, look at it this way. The left-wing governments are in power all over the Western world. He's talking about first and second world nations. We're talking about the European Union, the United Kingdom, Canada, the United States. Specifically, he's talking about pretty much those countries, maybe some of the NATO countries as well. So if a majority of people are voting against their own interests in these countries, in these first world and second world nations in Europe and North America, is that not what, quote, we the people, end quote, want? And the answer to that is no, it is not correct. And Brock, I want to be very clear, because the American system is very different than any of the other systems. So they don't have we the people anywhere else in the world except America. There is no we the people in Canada. There is no we the people in the United Kingdom or France, Germany, Sweden, Norway. They don't have it. It doesn't exist. So they don't have that right. They don't have that power. In addition, let's also remember, within the last month and a half, we have seen many countries, all of Europe, the European Union, voted to stop moving left, which instantly made them center-right, if not far-right, which in America, that would put them in actually the center of America. Center-right in Europe would be probably moderate Democrat to center-left in the United States. That's how far left of America most of the European Union, most of the other nations are. What would be their center-right is our center-left, realistically. They're that far shifted over. And because that's what the people wanted, the people voted throughout Europe and many of the countries in Europe to stop moving left and to actually consider being centrist, if not center-right. And they freaked out. In France, there were riots for weeks, literally 2 weeks. We were covering this on the show. 2 weeks of riots in France because the people said, stop moving left. That's all they said. Stop moving left. Let's maybe consider enforcing laws about illegal immigration. Maybe, since we can't handle the number of illegal aliens, maybe because they're not integrating into our society, maybe because the infrastructure, they don't have it to be able to handle the number of, quote, refugees or open border individuals, they couldn't handle it. So they said, maybe we need to enforce our immigration laws that every country on the planet has. And that was too much. The left went violent. And every time, anywhere in the world, the left, when they don't get what they want, are always violent. They always riot. They don't protest, they riot. They burn down buildings, they burn down objects, they destroy statues, they destroy buildings, they attack people, they block roads and stop people from being able to go to and from work, visit family. Hell, they block off emergency vehicles from being able to save people's lives. That is a fact. Every time. That's in the United States, that's in Canada, United Kingdom, all of Europe, everywhere. And we saw it in France as well. The left, when they don't get what they want, they don't just have a temper tantrum, they have a riot. They inflict violence and they try to coerce the rest of the citizens to do what they say with that threat of violence, that actual violence that they put forward. So, no, I understand your reasoning there, Brock. I understand why you asked the question, and I thank you for asking the question. But no, it doesn't. The fact that we're seeing Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron and Justin Trudeau and other leaders, we're seeing them crack down on free speech. We're seeing them punish people for saying things they don't like. That's not because the public agrees with them. It's because they have power, and the people in those countries don't have free speech. They don't have the right to object. So that's something that's important to keep in mind when we're having these conversations, why it's so dangerous and why this loop is always so much more powerful when it goes over to Europe, and then we get that backlash here in the United States. So I hope that answers the question for you. I'm not sure if it did or didn't, but I thank you for your question. If it's unclear, you can always call in at 929-715-8569, or you can leave another comment, or you can super chat. We get super chats both on Rumble and or on YouTube. I'm always happy to have them, and I'm always happy to answer your questions. Everyone, whether or not it's something I'm talking about, I always want to speak to you, because this is a conversation. We're having a conversation. So that's, I wanted to cover that. So with that said, and I think it's very important, I also wanted to talk about what we're seeing with Tim Walz. Kamal Harris was anointed, literally anointed by the left. Okay? Oh, come on. Sorry.
20.
Sorry, folks. Give me 1 second here. One of my screens is messing up, and I'm trying to get to the next segment so I can show it to you. There we go. So, here we go. So this is from The Hill, of their program Rising. And in there, they were looking at MSNBC 2022, a very difficult interview with Tim Walz to be able to find. Because just like with what happened to Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, his background has been scrubbed because the monopoly, Google, and its counterpart or its subsidiary, YouTube, scrubbed their internet, their algorithm, so that people would have great difficulty. Even members of the press who have done articles, who have studied this information, who know that these things were said, and they're just looking for that evidence, that video or that article, that evidence to show to the rest of the world and say, yeah, here's the confirmation. This person said these things. Yeah, it's almost impossible to find now. And that's the problem with the Google monopoly, especially when that monopoly decides that you can only hear or talk about the approved messages. That's how they fortified the 2024 election. That's how they fortified the 2020 election. It's how they make sure that you don't know that Joe Biden is a zombie working part-time as president, because you don't get to have any information unless they approve of it. Again, going back to free speech, it doesn't exist. When you see the left, when they want something, your free speech is not a factor. In fact, it is an impediment. And with this, we see that Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, who actually enabled the riots, the George Floyd riots in Minneapolis, he enabled and allowed an insurrectionist autonomous zone to exist in Minneapolis for a year and a half, breaking every local, state, and federal law, and he allowed it to exist, did not send in the National Guard, did not try and stop it. Even though it destroyed neighborhoods, people died, he didn't care. This is Tim Walz, the wonderful person that he is. And Tim Walz was here, and he says, I believe I have it up at the right spot, so let's see if we can get that.
And, you know, we kind of brush them off. Now we know it's intimidation at the ballot box. It's undermining the idea that mail-in ballots aren't legal. I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy. Tell the truth.
So he's upset that there are people who are saying that they had issues with mail-in ballots, that they had questions about mail-in ballots, because with the First Amendment in America, you can have questions about our government and the operation of our government. You may not be able to say that in the United Kingdom or in Canada or in France or Germany. You can in America. You can say, I don't trust that system. I don't think it's working properly. That's one of our rights. And so he's upset about that, and he says that's akin to hate speech. That's coercion for asking a question he didn't like, a question that didn't help the political agenda of his party. Now, it's in the best interest of the public to ask a question about the way our government is operating. Is it efficient? Is it effective? Is it the best thing we can do? Is there a better way to do these things? Tim Walz doesn't care. That's not his agenda. He wants to maintain power. He wants his party to have power. And he wants to punish people for not going along with the approved message, as he is saying here.
Where the voting places are, who can vote, who's able to be there. And watching some states continue to weaken the protections around the ballot, I think is what inspiring us to lean into this. Again, all we're asking is to make it as easy and simple as possible to exercise their right to vote and participate in our democracy. And I'm in 100% agreement.
No one in America has been denied the right to vote. See, this is the way he gets to push his agenda. Oh, see, I'm only trying to protect the public. I'm only trying to protect you. I'm trying to be the good guy. I'm trying to help you. I'm from the government and I'm here to help, says Tim Walz, except no one has been denied the ability to vote. No one. Black people vote. Women vote. Asians, Hispanics. If you're an American citizen, you can vote, and no one is stopping you from voting. You can register, and you can go and make a provisional ballot if you need to. The only thing that some states are asking for is you bring an ID. Something that, by the way, Kamala Harris requires. If you want to go to see Kamala Harris speak in Arizona, and this is a fact, you wanted to go and see Kamala Harris speak in Arizona this Friday, you had to bring an ID. First of all, you couldn't go. It wasn't open to the Arizona Democratic Party had to send out an invitation to you, which you could not give to anyone else. It was only good for the people they sent it to. So you couldn't give it to your brother or your sister, your mom, your dad, your cousin, your girlfriend, whatever you may have. You couldn't transfer it to them and let them go instead of you. No. It had your name on it, and you were the only one to get it. By the way, no one knows how you got on the list to be able to go. No one told. The Democratic Party is not telling anyone how they made this list, but it's a list that they somehow came up with. And they said, okay, you're invited. You can go and see Kamal Harris speak, but you have to bring an ID so that you can be in, because they don't trust the public. This is Kamala Harris. This is the Democratic Party. This is the Arizona Democratic Party, as reported on by KJZZ, KJazz from Phoenix. This is their reporting. And they're telling you, oh, yeah, you need ID. But here it is. Tim Walz is saying, oh, no, ID, you don't need that to vote. You need it to see him speak, to hear Kamala Harris speak. You need it for the driver's license to be able to go and get in the car and drive to the event. You need it to buy beer, to buy cigarettes. You need it to get on a plane, but you don't need ID to vote for them. No, no, no. They want your vote, and maybe a few illegal aliens as well. Maybe duplications. They don't care. The dead can still vote. The dead speak and they vote because they're Democrats somehow. And this is what Tim Walz is saying. This is what he is promoting. Oh, it's duplicitous and it is insulting that he knows the value of having ID. Otherwise, he and Kamala wouldn't require people to have the ID in Arizona. If they were so sure that ID is unnecessary, that they don't need to confirm who it is, for invitations they sent out, and no one else can use that invitation, just the person on the name. So to verify that you are the person that had the invitation, you have to bring ID. How is that different than voting? How is that different than showing up and saying, I'm this voter? Well, you have to have ID. Prove it. Just like you had to prove who you are to go and listen to Kamala Harris talk. Oh, I'm sorry, was that inconvenient? Was that something that we're not supposed to talk about, that we're not supposed to notice? And when we do, well, Tim Walz goes, that's misinformation, that's disinformation. So far, everything I've said is factual. I just showed you the actual website. I showed you the news organization that's reporting on this, that this is what the Arizona Democratic Party has done. He's saying it's misinformation, it's disinformation. No, it's information you don't like. There is a difference, a very big difference. And just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not true. And it doesn't mean that there isn't a double standard that is in play. And the only answer that now this you may want to disagree with if you're a Democrat, but the conclusion I come to is you're using this double standard for your advantage. You don't want people to be checked because you want dead people to vote in elections. Whether it's a lot or a little, doesn't matter. You want it to happen because every single vote you get, even if it's from a dead person, even if it's from an illegal alien, even if it's multiple votes from people from other states, you want it because it's your advantage. And the only way people can find out it's happened is if you either know the person who voted and you catch them in person, or you do an audit, which Democrats in Democratic states don't do. They fight against that. You can't do an audit in New York State. You can't do an audit in California. They refuse. The system, the bluer than blue Democratic system, refuses to do an audit to double check whether or not. That's why the independent New York audit, it's an organization, New York Audit, they found that there's 53,000 homeless people who are registered to vote in New York State. I actually covered them. I covered their live event when they were showing their data from New York State that they were able to independently research for 2 years to find out 53,000 homeless people are registered. Do you know what you need to register to vote in New York State? An address. You need an address. So if you don't have an address, you can't vote because you can't be registered to vote. People don't know what district you're in. They don't know who represents you because you have no place of existence. You may not like that. You may want to argue that, but that is New York State law. That is the law that Democrats passed along with Republicans. They passed that and said, this is the minimum requirement to be able to vote in New York State. You have to have an address. 53,000 homeless people, how did they get to vote? And they did, in fact, these are actual votes. 53,000 homeless people without an address actually voted in elections, local elections, state elections, and federal elections. Now, I have to ask you a question. How could they vote if they didn't have an address, and that is a requirement in New York State? Oh, well, we just wanted to make it easy. Well, that seems to be a problem, doesn't it? I'm asking. Doesn't that seem like an issue? Well, according to Tim Walz, asking the question, that's misinformation. That's disinformation. I'm discouraging people to vote. No, I'm asking people to verify their vote. I'm asking to make sure that every vote counts and that there aren't duplicate votes or extra votes or miscast votes. I'm asking for an audit, but he wants you to think that's just bad news. See, this is the problem with Tim Walz, because he wants you to think he's looking out for you. He's not. He's looking out for his party. He's looking to leverage the advantage for them. And that's something that The Hill brought up. That's something that you can see in his NBC interview from 2022, where he's saying, you're the problem, and the solution is obey. That's pretty big. Let me go on. He also wants to approve, and he has been, and this is from the Associated Press. This is an article from March 8th of 2023. And what do we see? Minnesota governor protects rights for gender-affirming care. This is something that across the world, across the entire globe, countries are saying this is a pretty bad idea. That children who cannot and do not have the right in any country, including the United States, they do not have a right to make decisions for themselves because they're not of the age of consent. They do not understand the consequences. And he's saying, you know what? Chop off their genitals. This is the guy who Kamala Harris wanted to run with. This is who she thinks is the right choice for America. A guy who says, yes, we should have 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, teenagers chop off their genitals before they get through puberty. Something that is irreversible. This will destroy your life forever. You don't have to believe me. Ask Blair White. She'll tell you all about it. So I find this to be insulting and upsetting. Insulting and upsetting and terrifying to me. Absolutely. Because he's all in favor of this right, which most people have an issue with. Now, let me be very clear. If you're over the age of 18 and you want to chop off your genitals, knock yourself out. You're a grown adult. Do what you're going to do. Don't ask me to pay for it. Don't ask me to fix things for you if something goes wrong. That's your choice. That's your burden to bear, not mine. I don't have that burden. I didn't force you to do that, and no one should force you to do that. That's your choice as a grown adult in America. You have the freedom to make bad decisions. That's part of freedom. It's a double-edged sword. You can make the right decision. You can make the wrong decision. You deal with the consequences. Either way, it's on you. You have agency, not the government, not the state, not a political party. You have those rights. You have those consequences. So if you're over 18 and you say, hey, I just want to go and chop off my genitals, knock yourself out. Go do it. Hope you can afford it. Hope it works out for you. I'm happy for you if it works out for you. It's not my life. I don't care. I'm not doing it. But I'm also not going to let some governor decide for an entire state that, hey, here's an idea. I'm going to let all these children chop off their genitals. And let me put it this way for you guys. Where historically, for about 50 years, we know that the number of trans people in America and around the world is about 0.5%. That's in America and even less around the rest of the world. About 0.5% of the population. And within the last 5 years, that number has exploded from 0.5% to, depending on which study you want to go with, somewhere between 6 and 15% of the youth. Suddenly, we went from 0.5% thinking that they are trans to somewhere as much as 15% of the entire population. Now, you'll hear from the left saying, see, that's because freedom. They can now go and express themselves. No one stopped them from expressing themselves before. In fact, the kids didn't even know that they had that expression before. But fine, you could say that. But here's my counter. What if you're wrong? What if gender affirming care, without any understanding, just saying, oh, you have today you think you want to be G.I. Joe, tomorrow you want to be Barbie. What if you're wrong? What if you cut off your genitals, you cut off the genitals of that child? Forget the adult. You're an adult. Deal with it. The child. You go to that 13-year-old child and you cut off their genitals, and then when they turn 15, 16, 17, 20, 25, and they suddenly go, this was wrong. That's not who I am. And now it's too late. Their life has changed forever. You have destroyed their life. They turn out to be like the Tennessee trans shooter, where they become bitter and violent and vicious and angry at the world because the promise they were told that if they chop off their genitals, their life will be perfect. They will have all the power that they want. They will have all the love that they want. People will accept them as this new creature that they have decided that they need to be. And when that doesn't happen, when they learn the reality that it's just as difficult to be a human being, whether you're male or female, that you're still going to deal with problems, that not everyone is going to love you, you're not going to suddenly become super powerful, you're not suddenly going to be given gold and jobs and everything you've ever wanted. When you come to that realization, it's too late. And what do? The trans Tennessee shooter decided to take that out on the rest of the public. They decided to harm other people and get themselves killed. That's a process. And if only 1% of the 15% of kids that we are trying to convince to chop off their genitals, if only 1% of them are mistakes, what happens then? What do we do for them? That's the argument I have always had for these people who believe in gender-affirming care. This is the question that no one wants to ask Governor Tim Walz. No one's going to ask Kamal Harris. They're never going to say, and what happens if you're wrong? What if we follow your idea of this gender-affirming care and we chop off these children's genitals and you're wrong? What do we do for them? No one has an answer. And I've gone into forums of trans groups on Twitter and on the internet, and I've asked them, hey, do you know if there's any program, if there's any conversation, any kind of help that is out there for what if we are wrong? What if we're wrong just 1% of the time? They said, there isn't. There's no help. There's no organization. They're not considering the consequences. They're just saying, do it. Tim Walz is, again, saying, do it or else. Tim Walz, Mr. Don't believe in the misinformation, don't believe in the disinformation, don't ask questions, is sitting there saying, hey, we're going to cut off those kids' genitals. Don't ask questions. Just obey. Just do what he said because he feels like that's the right answer. Well, what if your feeling is wrong, Tim Walz? Because you're not omnipotent. You're not the smartest man in the room. In fact, you're not that smart at all because Tim Walz lied about his history. He lied. He lied to the American people. As we can see here in Newsweek from August 9th, what did they say? The National Guard says that Tim Walz lied. Tim Walz told the American people, and I believe it's here in the first paragraph, the Minnesota National Guard is disputing, in other words, they're telling you he's wrong, that Governor Tim Walz's military biography, saying that the VP candidate did not hold the rank of command sergeant major at the time of his retirement. See, Tim Walz has been running around saying, I was a command sergeant major, the highest rank you can get in the enlisted army, in the National Guard. Highest rank. He's right up there, E9. He's saying, I am at the top. Except he isn't. That's a lie. He did not get, yes, he was acting in that capacity when he was in the service. When he retired, because he did not qualify. This is important because I know we hear from the left all the time. Checkbox, checkbox. They're more concerned about the checkbox, but qualifications are what runs the world. That's the true important thing. That's the substance. And substantively, Tim Walz was not a command sergeant major. That's a fact. Substantively, factually, empirically, he was not what he's been saying he is. He's lying to American people. And he knows this. He knows this. He was in the National Guard for 24 years. He was in the logistics and command. There's two parts of the military as you get into the higher and higher and higher ranks. We're talking about an E7, an E8, an E9. When you get into those ranks, you have two sides. You have the side that fights the actual war, and you have the logistics, the paperwork, the more office and paperwork side. And Tim Walz is a paper pusher. In the military, he pushes paper. He deals with logistics. Now, I'm ex-military. I understand. My family, many military. I'm not putting down the guys in logistics. They are critical. You know, I've worked with them. I worked with radios. I understand. Logistics keeps you alive. Logistics is important because you need bullets to fight the enemy. You need food to keep yourself alive. You need bandages and medical supplies to keep your guys healthy. I understand. You need boots that you can actually fit your feet. Logistics is critical to any military. I'm not going to put them down. Not the same. I'm just saying. Doing the supply and logistics is not the same thing as shooting the enemy. Two different ends. Tim Walz knew that there's a difference between fighting the enemy on the front line and pushing paper and making sure people have the bullets to fight the enemy on the front line. He decided that his thing was he was going to work on the logistics, on the paperwork, making sure the bullets and the food are available for the guys who are going to fight on the front line. Let's understand the difference between those two things. I see the comments. I'm getting to them. Give me 1 second. And he knew, because he's been in for 24 years, he knows that he didn't have the qualifications, which you have to keep the rank. See, if he had the qualification, if that was his rank, he would have retired with it. And he would get the benefits in his retirement for that. Except he didn't. He gets the qualifications of the, not Master of Gunnery Sergeant, Sergeant Major. Because he knows better. So he lied to you. See, this is what the Democrats, in 2024, the Democrats have no problem lying to you. Oh, Kamal Harris, 3 months ago, she needs to be replaced. In April, in March, Kamala Harris has to be thrown out. She has to be replaced on the ticket. Joe Biden is the greatest thing ever. Oh, Joe Biden, he's a zombie? You found out? Joe Biden's gone. We need Kamala Harris. She's the best thing ever. Don't pay attention to anything we said before about Joe Biden. Don't pay attention to anything we said before about Kamala Harris. She's now the best thing that has ever existed. She's the best person. And Tim Walz is great with you too. Oh, Tim Walz? Yeah, he's a command sergeant major. No, but he isn't. Oh, really? Oops. Made a mistake. Sorry. How could we have possibly known? Only spent 24 years in the military, only 24 years dealing with paperwork, dealing with the command structure where he has to enforce these things. He knows. He knew exactly what he was saying. He lied to the American people, to their face, and that's not the worst of it. The worst of it is coming up, and I will get to that in 1 second. let me deal with the comments. So, let me go to the comments. Joanna called Tim Walz a compassionate narcissist. I don't think he's compassionate at all. I think he's an opportunist. I think Tim Walz is an opportunist, and he is dedicated to his political ideology. He's a propagandist, and he takes advantage of people because they don't pay as much attention to the details in politics, and so he gets away with things because as I've been showing you, he wants to shut people down. He doesn't want questions. He wants obedience, and that I think is a problem. But I understand your answer, Joanne. Mike Bowie says, so who's paying for these operations? Well, in terms of the gender affirming care, your state. And because the state is they apply for grants from the federal government, so you pay for these. Almost all of these programs have a federal grant attached to them, as well as a state grant attached to them, because they're in bluer than blue progressive states. That's where you find this gender affirming care, and they're getting money from the government to be able to enact these surgeries that we have been seeing study after study around the globe is not in the best interest of kids. But you're not supposed to talk about that because that's misinformation. That's disinformation. Be silent. Obey. Keep your head down. Tim Walz knows best. I really am upset about that. Let's see. Joanna Peterson says, Stolen Valor. We're getting to that. I just want you to understand the full scope of Tim Walz, the man that Kamala Harris picked because she thought he was the best match for her, not for the party, not for voters, not for America, for her. He matched. He had the best personality, the best political outlook to match her own, whatever that might be. So she's telling us that secretly, down deep, where she has not responded yet, these are some of the things she believes in too. That's why she wanted him, because he believes in things she believes in. Otherwise, she'd have picked someone else. The politically smart match would have been Josh Shapiro. He has a state that's much more important, Pennsylvania. They need the electoral votes. They need the support. Josh Shapiro could have brought in the money. He's a young man. He's well liked amongst Democrats. He could have brought in more, but she went with Tim Walz, an older man, a less known individual, somebody who's far more progressive. Tells you something. The choice she made is important. Just like when you hear from the left and they say, well, J.D. Vance, he's just like Donald Trump, and that's why Trump picked him. Yes, and that's also why Kamala picked Tim Walz. It's the same logic. It's the same reason. It's the same thing. But let me go on a little bit. Graham says, Michael, there is not enough compassion for young people who are so lost in life that they believe a gender change surgery will be the answer to the painful emotional and spiritual hole they have in their hearts. I have compassion for them. That's why I don't want them to chop off their genitals. That's why. That is compassion. So, Graham, I understand your comment. I didn't say they can't talk to people. I didn't say they can't investigate different avenues of their life, that they can speak to their parents, which I think is important. They get to speak to professionals. Okay. They get to speak to their peers. Fine. Maybe even speak to people in the trans community about that process if they think that's necessary, to get all the actual information about what the surgeries entail, what happens if there's complications, what if you think you've made the wrong decision, so that they can have more information over their lifetime as they grow, so that they can understand the consequences of what they have done. It is because of my compassion that I want to give them all of that time to be sure, to make sure that they have made the right choice for them. Because children don't have rights. They don't have the ability to make these decisions. They don't understand their consequences. And as I said, when you're 18, do what you want. Now, do I have as much compassion for an 18-year-old as I do for a 13-year-old? Absolutely not. An 18-year-old's a grown adult. Do what you want. That's your choice. Live with your consequences. A 13-year-old doesn't understand the consequences. So I, as a compassionate adult, want to make sure that the decisions they do make and what they live with is as good as it can be. So it is compassion. It may not sound nice, but I don't care about sounding nice. It doesn't make people feel warm and fuzzy inside. I don't care. Because feelings are transitory. You may not feel good about it today, and in 5 years you'll understand that it's the best decision that you ever made in your life. But how you feel about it, that changes every 30 seconds. No one has, you want feelings, your feelings will change in 5 minutes. Literally. In 5 minutes, you'll probably have a different feeling about whatever it is you're doing than what you have right now. I don't care about feelings. I care about facts. I care about efficiency. I care about effectiveness. I care about people's lives and the choices that they make. And I'm willing to say that even as other people will go, oh, but you're a phobe, you're an ist. You're an ist and a phobe. That you can't say that. Yes, I can. First of all, First Amendment. Yes, I can say that. You don't have to like it. I can say it. Just like you can say whatever you want. That's fine. But what we're trying to decide is what's best for a child. First of all, should be the parents making the decision, not the child. Second of all, other influencers should not be affecting the family. They have a decision, and they should make that decision over time, giving the child as much information over that time period so that they can make the most qualified decision once they become an adult, not before. And again, I say, what if you're wrong? What if the government is wrong? Which is why I don't want the government involved. Because historically, the government is always wrong. They're wrong about economics. They're wrong about spending. They're wrong about the policies they have. They're wrong about the processes that they put forward. The government is eternally wrong. Look at every department of the government and tell me which one is running efficiently. None of them. So why would I trust if the government can't do the only things that the government actually does well? Collect taxes, commit war. That's it. And even there's loopholes. There's problems. And those are the only two things they do actually well. Those are two things that the government can do well because that's what it's built to do. That's what it's supposed to do. And even that they have problems with. And you mean I want the federal government to make an overreaching policy to deal with each and every child whose circumstances they don't know? For the state government, for Governor Tim Walz to go around the state of Minnesota and to make a blanket statement that every child in Minnesota, if they say tomorrow that they're a frog, that they're a toaster, that they're a boy or a girl, that we have to give them surgery right then and there. We have to agree with that child who doesn't understand the concepts they're talking about, who doesn't understand the consequences of what they're saying. We are compelled that we have to accept that we have to treat that child in that manner, even if it is detrimental, even if it is dangerous and will hurt that child. That's what he's saying. I don't agree with that. And if he is willing to do that at a governor's level, what will he do at the national level? Think about it. Again, and imagine he's wrong 1% of the time. That's all it needs to be. 1%. You're talking about tens of thousands of people who will never live a normal life. That's just 1%. Tens of thousands. Graham goes on to say, and on this issue, we have failed as a society to provide these young people guidance, support, education, pathways to purpose, and vision to become the best version of themselves. By doing so, to contribute their part to the story of humanity that only they can. I disagree with you 110%. And let me explain, Graham. because we always have provided young people guidance. We've provided them support. Education nowadays is more about indoctrination, but the information is available so they can be educated. We've provided them with pathways to a purpose. Often that comes from the family. Most of what you're talking about is things that come from the family, maybe the local community, when it would mean friends of your family and your friends of your family, and a vision to become the best version of themselves. We do provide that. And in America, we have the freedom for them to experiment to do exactly that. Just means they're not guaranteed to get it. See, that's where the confusion comes in. A lot of younger people think they have a guarantee, that they're entitled to these visions, this better life. You're not. There is no guarantee. You are not entitled to a better life. You're not guaranteed a better life. It's not the purpose of the government, whether at local, state, or federal level, to make sure your life is going to be great and that you get to live the best version of your life. That's not anyone's consequence or requirement except your own. Period. And if you don't live the best life you can, that's on you, not the government, at the local, state, or federal level, not on me or anyone else. That's on you. So, if these kids are lost, that's a parenting issue. Go to the parents. Work with them. Maybe the local community. Go to them. The federal government, the state government, don't belong in that local, very small family structure. It's not their job. It's not something they can do or handle well. Tim Walz thinks, yes, the government should micromanage your life. That is what he's saying with gender-affirming care. The government is going to micromanage your life. They're going to make decisions. They're going to tell people how they can talk to you. They're going to decide what words people use to describe you. They're going to decide whether or not you chop off your genitals. This is what the government's going to do. And what if the government is as wrong about that as the government is about Bidenomics, about inflation, about unemployment, about running the post office? What if they're as wrong as that? And that happens to 1% of the population. What do we do then? Oh, they don't even have a consequence. They have not even considered that they could be wrong. That is one of the biggest signs that they are wrong. They don't have a plan B. They don't have a fallback position. They don't have a backup plan. They are so convinced that they are right, they don't have any other option. They don't have any other choice. They haven't considered any other infrastructure to help people if they are wrong. That means they are wrong, because we're human beings. No one is that correct all the time. And Governor Tim Walz isn't God. He's not Jesus. He's not one of the apostles. He's wrong. He's as wrong as any other human being. Just because he's a governor, and people like to think this all the time, that, oh, well, he's a governor. That means he's a human being. I know lots of people. I've known people who have run for governor, people who are in Congress, who have run for Congress. I've talked to people who have had exemplary lives across this nation in every type of field and endeavor you can think of. For 56 years, I've been talking to people all over the place. And I can tell you, they're just as dumb and just as mistaken as anyone else. Any random person walking down the street might be as smart or smarter than Tim Walz or me or you. That's a fact. And just because they got elected did not make them smarter. It's not osmosis. The number of votes you get doesn't somehow change your IQ or fill you full of knowledge on information you've never studied in your life, things that you don't know anything about. That's just the reality of it. I know we want our elected officials to be smarter than us, but they're not. We want them to have more knowledge than us. They don't. That's just a reality. They make us feel like they're more efficient, that they're more effective, that they're more knowledgeable. They're not. They truly aren't. I've had many, many conversations with candidates and elected officials before and after elections. And I can tell you without a doubt in my heart, they were just as dumb the day before the election as the day after the election. They didn't get any smarter. They had the same hangups, the same mistakes, the same problems the day before the election as the day after the election. Whether they win or they lose, whether it was a landslide or whether it was by a slim margin, that did not affect anything about their knowledge, their capabilities, their effectiveness. Has nothing to do with it. So when Tim Walz is saying, oh, this is the answer, this is what compassion is, no, that's your opinion, that's your feeling. And factually, empirically, I don't agree with you because you haven't taken into account when you're wrong, and you will be wrong. I don't know if it's 1% of the time, 5% of the time, 10% of the time. I don't know what the number is going to be, but I guarantee that a top-down federal state government micromanaging people's lives as prepubescent children, they're going to get it wrong. Some percentage. And Governor Tim Walz says that's okay. Doesn't matter if he's wrong. Do it anyway because he said so. That is not compassion. That's not even close. That is the exact opposite of compassion. No one has to agree with me. Don't have to agree with me. That is where I stand on it, and that's why I stand on that, and why I think Tim Walz is a bad individual. And when we look at his character, that he is willing to lie to the American people, that he has lied to the American people. Forget about the lies of Kamal Harris and Joe Biden. Forget about the fact that Kamala Harris and the news media didn't want to tell you the truth, and if Joe Biden had somehow scraped on by in that debate, he'd still be running for the presidency, and they'd still lie to you, and you wouldn't know that he's a part-time president. Okay, so they don't have any integrity. But Tim Walz, his integrity is in question because he lied to the American people about something so absolutely simple, his rank. He gave himself a promotion, and it's as simple as, what's your rank on your retirement? Oh, it's not the same. It's lower. You didn't have that promotion. You were acting by that level, but you didn't have the promotion. But he's counting on the fact that most people in America haven't been in the military. He's counting on the fact that most people don't know how retirements happen in the military. He's counting on the fact that most people won't double check. He's counting on the fact that the monopoly of Google, which controls YouTube as well, is going to hide the truth as much as possible so that he can skate on by. And he did. He got through as a member of Congress. He escaped and got his way up to the governor's office. He's a gubernatorial, not candidate, but he is the governor of Minnesota. And no one really checked. But when you go for the vice presidency and the presidency, that's a different level of scrutiny, and people did find out, and people did pay attention, and people do know what the actual workings of the government, of the military are. And they did see his rank and see, hey, that doesn't match up. Something's wrong. You're lying, and you should know better. And that's the minimum reason why you should not trust and not want Tim Walz in charge of anything. Because he's willing to lie to you. He's willing to impose his will over yours. But let's get to the stolen valor. Let's talk about the stolen valor of Tim Walz. Tim Walz today is saying he misspoke. He said, I served in the military. His words were very clearly that he fought in combat. He was crystal clear. It was not a mistake of the words. It was not a misunderstanding. He didn't somehow slip up. It was absolutely clear. He said that he had been in combat and that he earned his position. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz misspoke. CNN, I love CNN, misspoke when he directly told you that he had been in combat. In a newly resurfaced video from 2018 in which he said he had handled assault weapons in war. Oh yes, I've handled a M16 in war. How is that a misspoke? It's very clear. There aren't a bunch of meanings of the word war. In war is very definitive. It is very clear. Saying that I am using a weapon in a war is crystal clear. There is no ambiguity. You don't get to misspeak. You get to lie. And CNN is covering for his ass, and they know it. They are trying to make it gentle, to make it seem like it's just partisan. It's just Mike being a Republican and conservative. He's so upset because, I mean, anyone would have misunderstood when he said, I used a M16, a machine gun, in war. No, that war is combat. You're saying you're a combat veteran, that you have served in combat. I served in the military. I have never said that I'm a combat veteran. Why? Because I'm not. I know many friends of mine. Some of them are combat veterans because they fought in war. They are combat veterans. Other friends of mine who also served in the military during the time I was in, before me, after me, they never went into combat. They're not combat veterans. Are they veterans? Absolutely. Are they combat veterans? No. There is a difference. It is very distinct. It is absolutely clear. There is no misspeaking that. And Tim Walz did not misspeak. He told you directly, and he did it for political advantage. Probably one of the worst reasons that you could possibly do that is for political advantage. To be able to get to become a member of Congress, to become governor, and now to be vice president, he used the public. He used the compassion and the understanding and the forgiveness and the desire to help and reward those who've made some of the greatest sacrifices for America that you possibly can. They have bled, they have been hurt, and that is critical. And Tim Walz, he lied. He lied to you. That's called stolen valor. He didn't have the rank that he told you he had. He didn't serve in combat, and he told you he did. And he wanted the benefits of having served and being in combat. He wanted the benefits of that he did not earn. And when he had the chance to earn that, because he could have gone to combat. He could have fought alongside his men. And when he had the chance to do that, he ran away. Tim Walz is a coward. He's a coward. There is no other way to word that. There is no other description of that. When you have the opportunity, when he has the mandate to go to war, and his answer instead is, I'm going to go and retire. I'm going to run away. I will let others fight the fight that he is supposed to be having. That is cowardice. There's no other way to word that. There is no other way to think of that. He is a coward. Yes, the dog is... Khan has not been doing well lately, as you can see. We've had some issues. And I need to get him a ultrasound. Do you know how expensive an ultrasound is for a dog? We're talking $1,200. I just don't have $1,200. Do you see a sponsor on this channel? You don't. You know, and did you notice all of the super chats coming in? You didn't? Okay, I'm dirt poor. Okay, unlike MSNBC or any of the news media with 10,000 employees, tens of millions of dollars coming in. I don't got any of that. $1,200. I mean, if people are asking, if you doubt me, if you're wondering whether or not I will show you the receipt that says it's going to cost at least $1,200 for this little puppy to go out and get an ultrasound. So, and he's telling me he wants to go outside. That's what he's letting me know. So I'm trying to do the Tim Walz thing here in a little bit. But it's just amazing to me. Just really, really expensive. Anyway, sorry, I segued there. But Tim Walz is a coward. There is no two ways. I had this conversation. Where is it? I had this conversation with my associates. Here it is. Over at the Friday roundtable this week. And Mike Marshall, who you see, if you can see him, he's on the left-hand side here. Give me a second. So Mike Marshall, former Marine. I'm a former, we've also served. Almost the same time Mike and I were in the Marine Corps. I know Frank and Dal and Jan all have family and friends who have served in the military. We are all people who are very familiar with this. It is something that is near and dear to our hearts. And when I tell you that Tim Walz is a coward, let me be clear. We were very clear about it during Fridays. I think we took an hour to go through all of the details. He knew Tim Walz was part of the command structure. He's part of the command structure. So he knew that his troops, he would have been the guy who was making sure the troops were prepared, that all the logistics were in place to be able to send his guys to a war zone. He would have been requisitioning all of the food, the boots, the bullets, the weapons, all the supplies that they need. He would have been doing that months beforehand. He knew when they were leaving. He had to. That's part of the whole thing of being an acting command sergeant major. He's in charge of the operations, making sure that everyone's ready to go and fight. And that's his job. When he's not there, they have to put someone else in. They have to train someone else to do his job. It makes it difficult. When he left, it made it harder for all of his soldiers to be able to do their job, because the guy they relied on for the operational skills, for making sure all the logistics were in place, he was gone. He left them. Someone else had to try and be trained and spun up to take his place. That's a problem. That's a problem. Tim Walz knew his guys were going to war. He knew exactly when they were going to war. Now, mind you, he could have been compelled. He's an enlisted. He's not an officer. Officers can retire any time they want. That's the difference about being an officer. They get to choose when they leave. They can retire at any time. They give up their commission. That's what it's called, giving up the commission. They can give up their commission. They can go off and be a civilian at any moment that they choose to. Enlisted don't get that right. You're in under your contract, and your contract can be extended without your consent at any time. It's part of the provisions of the contract. I've read my contract. I understand that. The contract says I don't need to have more than one meal, and it doesn't have to be hot every 3 days. Oh, that's nice. You get to sleep every other day. Read the contract. The fine print is crazy. And they can call you back to service within X period of time after you leave. Your contract's up, they can call you back. If you haven't left, they can extend your contract without your consent. Depends on the contract. It could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be more. The government can do it if they have a need. It's part of your contract. It's part of the oath that you swore. And that is part of what it is to be enlisted. You don't get options. You get commands. You get orders. So Tim Walz knew all of that. with 24 years of experience, using his command to use those orders, those rules against men with lower rank than himself. He's done this. And he, when given the option, they said, okay, we're going to go and fight in war. Mind you, he's not going to be on the front line. We're not talking about this old man running around with a 60-pound pack shooting with his rifle. He's not doing any of that. He's in the rear with all the gear. He's sitting in a desk, but he happens to be in a war zone. It's a desk in a war zone, so it's a little bit riskier than just sitting at the corner coffee shop, but he's still there with his troops, still doing his job. That's what he could have done. But no, he decided that was too much, and so he left. He ran away. And when he ran away, he told people that he was a combat veteran, which is an absolute lie. There is no way to misspeak about that. That is nothing but a blatant lie. And he also said that he had a higher rank than he actually attained. He retired with a lower rank than he promised people he had. He stole valor. He was looking for benefits for things he did not qualify for, that he did not do. It is unjust, it is wrong, it is evil, it is vile. And if I need a reason to say why I will never vote for Democrats, and a reason why I would never vote for Tim Walz for anything, I wouldn't vote for that man to sweep the streets, is because he's stolen valor, he's lied to the public, and he did it all because of his ambition, because he wants power. And that is not a good thing. Does anyone disagree with me? Is there anyone who wants to question that? I know that there's nobody who served in the military that will question this. There is no one who has served will question what I have laid out. Some of the things that we were talking about on the Friday roundtable in even greater detail than I have just outlined right now. No one's going to disagree with that. That is the truth. So every Democrat that's out there going, well, Tim Walz, he's a good guy because, he served in the military. No, he didn't. He invalidated his entire service. He took his entire 20 years of service and threw it down in a toilet. He burned it up. It's meaningless to me. And it should be meaningless to everyone. Now, some people will say Tim Walz is a traitor. I will say that's not correct. I don't think he's a traitor. I think he's a coward. I will say it to Tim Walz's face. He's a coward, but he's not a traitor. He wasn't going against America. He did not do the things that we have seen many people who are traitors, like the insurrectionists. He didn't try and take over a land in America, hold Americans hostage, disregard every local, state, and federal law. He didn't do those kinds of things, like we saw at the autonomous zones in Seattle, over in Minneapolis, like those in Portland. He didn't do that. But he was a coward. He did lie. He did steal people's valor. He is a horrible choice for any elected office because his ambition is more important to him than anything else. Everyone in the military that I know of agrees. Everyone in the military I know agrees. I have yet to hear an argument from anyone who has actually served or has had family who has served or who is close to anyone who served that disagrees with everything I've just said. Not one. I understand that people who don't know anything different think it's not that big a deal. It is a big deal. It is absolutely massive. It is a huge example of his character, which is missing. He has no character. He has nothing but ambition. He is vile. Vile, in my opinion. And if Kamal Harris thinks that having that man be that vile is complimenting her character, her position, her ideology, then she's probably a fan of the acolyte, and she's evil too. I cannot stand these people. I do not agree with them. I think it is evil. Someone would actually, she looked at his record, looked at the lies, and said, hey, no problem. He's in. I like him. I'm going to go with him. because he has the same political ideology, and that's all he has, political ideology. He is not a good person. He will not take care of children. He doesn't care of his own troops. He doesn't take care of his own troops. He doesn't have the deep love and concern of America. It doesn't exist. He has a deep love and concern for his political ideology. He has a deep love and interest in his political partisanship and making sure that it has all the control, but he does not love America. No, he does not. And let me also say that he's in line with people like Cori Bush, and there is a reason why Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush and the Democratic Socialists of America are losing power, that the public are rejecting them, and Ilhan Omar is about to get rejected as well. Why? It's not because somebody spent a lot of money on an ad. If you had a good record, it doesn't matter how much money I throw out there. If you saved a baby, I can't convince people that you killed the baby or dropped the baby when there's video evidence of it, when you did it and everyone witnessed it. No, Cori Bush is a bad member of Congress. Jamal Bowman is a bad member of Congress. The Democratic Socialists of America, like Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Hakeem Jeffries, these progressives are bad for America, and they do bad jobs at representing America. They don't even try to represent America, in my opinion. And they are just the same as Tim Walz. They will lie, they will cheat, they will do anything that they need to, in my opinion, to attain and maintain power. That's their concern. And that's why they want to make sure that you can't ask questions, that you don't get to speak up. They want you to be silent so that they can get as much power as possible. Because the moment you start asking questions, they look bad. The moment you start looking at the details, they look like they're absolutely horribly after power and power alone. Their ambition shines brighter than any other aspect of their life because they have no characteristics. They have no qualifications. They are purely ambition. They are purely greedy and selfish, and I think that is vile. And you are more than happy to quote me on that, folks. That's why these people can lie to you to your face. And they'll tell you things like, hey, when I get elected, I'm going to get rid of all the tips, taxes on tips. Why don't you do it now? When I get elected, I'm going to fix inflation. Why don't you do it now? When I get elected, I'm going to fix the border. That's been your job for 3.5 years. You didn't fix it. You did the exact opposite. You broke the system more than it was broken beforehand. That's your fault. So you can't tell me you're going to fix it when everything you have done has made it worse. You can't say these things. It's a lie. I know. Democrat Mike wanted me to bring up what we can see. Yes, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz look like they might win Wisconsin. They might win Michigan. Yes, but they're losing Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And Nevada and Wisconsin. Nevada. So they're losing 5 out of the 7 top battleground states. Now, if you want to look at the general election and say, well, Mike, how are they doing? 0.8%. It's barely better than Donald Trump. Barely better than Donald Trump. I think the honeymoon is over. People are looking at the record, at the actual history of these candidates, and they're saying to themselves, this isn't worth it. These people aren't good. This is essentially a tie. That 0.8, that's a tie. It's not a win. When Donald Trump was beating Biden, he had a 3.1%. That was enough to win. He was winning in Donald Trump was winning in every single battleground state. It wasn't a competition. Now it's gotten a little bit more competitive, but I don't think Kamala Harris wins. There is no landslide towards Kamala Harris. It's just that Democrats have a choice now. They actually have someone they can vote for. They had a zombie. Now they have a human being. It's a horrible human being. It's a human being with a horrible plan. And again, there is no plan. There is no plan. This is her website. Nothing. They offer nothing. They just lie. Kamala lied about Joe Biden, saying that he's of sound mind and great. Tim Walz lied about his valor, about his ability, about what he did, and what he wants to do to your children. He lied. They are liars. The DNC lied to you, saying that Kamala Harris is the bestest ever, when 3 months ago they said they got to get rid of this chick because she's broken. They lied. The DNC, they are lying to you. There should be no way in hell that these people win, and I don't think there is a way in hell that they win. I know some of my colleagues will say, and my peers will say, no, there's a path to victory here. I don't think so. Not unless people stop thinking. Okay. With that said, we've been on for 2.5 hours more. It's 7 o'clock. My puppy, as you heard earlier, was screaming at me because, as you can see with the cone, he's not been feeling well. He needs to go out. I need to go take care of him. So I'm going to go and do that now. Please, if you found anything we said in the first 2 shows and in the 2 segments, please like, share, and subscribe. Very important. Please subscribe. It helps us so much. I need to raise up money. I got to get money for that dog so that he can go and get an ultrasound. So like, share, and subscribe so that I can get a sponsor, and that'll help me be able to pay my bills for my dog because I love him to death. Khan's a great dog. He's 13 years old. But that's all I'm going to say there. I'm going to let it go. I hope you're going to be well. Look for some more content throughout the week. I thank you.